All right, thank you all for joining our panel. We have a great talk in store for all of you. It's a really beautiful day out in Vancouver, so anyone who's joining us from Vancouver, I'm sorry, we're gonna keep you in for a little bit longer. So really appreciate that you're all joining us here. To get us started, my name is Janet Tividad. I'm a growth marketing manager at Riipen. It's an edtech startup based here in Vancouver. As many of you are aware, COVID-19 kind of forced a lot of workplaces to shut down and move virtually over in the beginning of the year. And then for some reason or another, quite a few companies unfortunately had to cancel their summer internship programs. And this led to hundreds of students losing out on the opportunity to not only learn and gain experience, but they also missed out on the opportunity to provide value and share their skills because let's be honest, at the end of the day, that's what an internship is. It's this value exchange where students receive mentorship and experience, and then in exchange, they help out with a company's growth objectives. Thankfully, over the past summer, several companies managed to adapt and move their internships to a virtual setting. And now we're going to be chatting with four students here who had summer internships over the past summer, virtual internships over the summer. And they'll be sharing their experience, what worked really well, challenges they might have faced, and any other tips and advice they have for people out there. For any startups who are joining us here today, hopefully virtual internships might be brand new territory for all of you. So we hope you come out of this with some really great ideas for when you do end up hiring your intern, whether it's for this fall or the winter, or maybe even for next summer. And then if we have any students out here joining us, we hope you learn a few things about how you can succeed in your next virtual internship. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce all of you to our four panelists. I'm just going to start off with who I see on my screen first. We have Yogmaya Singh from the University of British Columbia Sauder School of Business, Priscilla Lam from Simon Fraser University, Emily Gubsky from the University of British Columbia as well, studying at the Faculty of Medicine, getting her MD, and then Jonathan Lee from Kwantlen Polytechnic University. Hello, all of you. To start off, yeah, hello. To start off, why don't we do a little bit of kind of just an intro to all of you. Tell us a bit about obviously where you study, what you study, and also what you did over the past summer. What was the company you worked for and what did you? Just a brief little bit on what you did. Let's start off with, again, since you're first on my screen, Yogmaya.
Hi, everyone. As Jen mentioned, I'm Yogmaya, and right now I study at UBC at their Sauder School of Business, and I'm studying finance and entrepreneurship, going into my last year, so my fourth year. And this summer I worked at Riipen as a marketing intern.
Thank you. If it wasn't obvious enough, I was Yogmaya's manager. Priscilla, how about you? Oh, you're on mute.
So I'm a fifth-year student at SFU. I'm majoring in entrepreneurship and have a minor in sustainable development. And over the summer, I worked with the League of Innovators. They are a national charity that advocates for youth entrepreneurship and change making. They run a whole bunch of programming for youth under 25, such as an accelerator program, a pre-incubator program, a bunch of online crash courses, and a self-directed educational platform. And that self-directed educational platform is called Innovators Academy, and which I was brought on as the educational coordinator in the summer to be working on that and to support its launch in May. And during my 13-week internship there that was remote, I worked on iterating the platform based on feedback from teachers, partnership seeking with a whole bunch of educator groups and youth groups across Canada, and supporting large virtual events to promote the platform to the youth-facing side. So super fun. I had to interact with a whole bunch of people from across Canada.
Very exciting. Priscilla gave us kind of that laundry list of a bunch of different things she did over the summer, and might be a bit of a surprise for some of you, especially if this is a virtual setting. You might expect things to be a bit slower. So we'll chat a bit more with Priscilla on kind of the nitty gritty of everything she did over the summer. Emily, how about you?
So as Jan said, I am now currently studying medicine. However, before the summer started, I was studying a combined program at UBC in computer science and microbiology and immunology. So a lot of my work this summer was a lot more biotech oriented. I ended up so my original research position fell through, so I ended up collecting a couple internships. The main one, though, was I spent some time working with the UBC single cell sequencing core. So I was doing a lot of bioinformatics, a lot of data analysis was what I was working with.
Very cool. Jonathan?
Yeah, hi. So I'm doing my my bachelor's in physics for modern technology at KPU. And for the summer, I worked as an applications engineer for Go and semiconductors. And I spent my time testing out and designing projects for their potential clients. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, all of you, for sharing that. Now, you might be, I might be jumping a little ahead here, but as you can see, we've kind of collected a group of students who've had quite a breadth of different types of internship experiences over the summer. Emily's done like 2 or 3, quite a few over the summer in data. Jonathan did one in engineering, and I believe the company itself was based in the US.
That's correct.
Yeah, Priscilla did a bunch of stuff with LOI, and of course, Maya worked with me at Riipen. So we're gonna dive in a bit more on kind of what they did, or more so how the internship experience was like over the summer. And for a few of them, this might have been their first internship experience. I know for Jonathan, this was his very first internship experience. But then for others, I guess Emily, Priscilla, and Yogmaya, this wasn't their first rodeo. They've had internship experience in the past, and so they can speak on kind of from Jonathan's perspective, what it's like to have your very first internship be virtual, and then from everyone else, kind of how the internship experience differed from in person last year to kind of a fully online virtual experience this year. Mm-hmm. So why don't we get started actually with a bit on the very first few days in your internship, which is onboarding. So the very first week or two in your internship, what did that look like? Because traditionally in an in-person one, you have HR sit down with you, talk about company stuff. You have your manager talk to you about what your daily tasks are and all of that. What did that look like in a virtual setting? Start with Emily.
Yeah, I definitely had a really rough start to the internship. I found that because it wasn't as defined as it usually was, we were both kind of figuring stuff out. So what my onboarding looked like was I got a massive information, and then I just kind of had to sort through it and figure it out for myself. A lot of it was trying to figure out how to get into our server, where my information was supposed to be stored, what I was supposed to be doing, what timesheets look like. So a lot of the things that usually would have been worked out, like you would sit down with your supervisor and talk about it at the start, wasn't really for me. However, I feel like once I had been able to clarify that it wasn't going well, we were able to work through it and just make sure that I actually adjusted in a useful way so that I could actually make some sort of progress pretty quickly.
That's great. I love that. I think that's kind of a phrase I always say: the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If you don't complain, well, not complain, but if you don't let people know that there's something happening, then no one will know that there's a problem. So that's a great way to kind of go about it. Yeah. Jonathan, how about you? How was your onboarding experience?
Yeah, actually for me, it was pretty straightforward. The first time I got in contact with my employer, it was by email. And we just had, we just scheduled a time that worked for both of us for our internship, or our interview. So it was all through phone call. And basically just asked questions just like any other employer would, So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. It was just like that. Yeah, just sharing about school experiences with them, and just seeing why I was interested with the company. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Priscilla, how about you?
For me, onboarding was pretty smooth sailing. A lot of our work was online, so I guess the transition that wasn't too difficult. I do have to say, because I have experience working online before, it was super helpful. Working with a new company online the first time, it was what I really appreciated from my onboarding experience was that everything was organized. My employer did take the time to plan out what my first week looked like, what my meetings would be, what I was expected to do every week, and it was giving a lot of time on my own to review materials, and because everything's super new. That's what I really appreciate. Just really set schedules for the first week and a lot of time to process on my own.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, quick follow-up question before I talk to you, Maya. What kind of tools or how was this material presented to you? And also, I'll ask this question to Emily and Jonathan. Like, how was this onboarding material presented to you guys?
We use Zoom a lot, so that's where all our meetings would take place, and then Slack a lot for messaging and sharing all the links and the files that I would have to look at. So those are like the two softwares that we used that was really helpful.
Yeah, so yeah, for me, it started out with phone call, then it gradually took, well, it definitely took some time for us to move over to Skype. Most of the time, actually, our first month actually was just through email, and we've learned the hard way that it wasn't the best way to go about communicating. So yeah, Skype. We used also TeamViewer as well. So I actually had to take to do some remote work for updating some firmware over on his computer. So I've done that as well.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's mostly Google Meets. That's where I did my interview. That's where we do our like weekly meeting. But a lot of the information was just presented over email through a variety of Google Docs and like Word docs and PowerPoints, and there was just a lot going on.
Awesome. Yeah. To speak on Jonathan's point a bit, that's probably a lesson that we'll all, or probably a running theme here, where you learn everything the hard way. 1 month of communicating just through email, and then you realize this isn't working out. And obviously it's a bit weird because internships are usually about 2 to 3 months long. So 1 month of doing things the wrong way, or the more challenging way, we'll say, is a bit weird and inefficient, but that's how we learn. Yugmai, how about you? How was your onboarding experience?
Yeah, my onboarding experience was pretty good because there were basically like, there's 2 offices in Riipen, the Toronto and the Vancouver office. So we had our onboarding with all the interns. So there were about 10 of us in one, or 13 of us in one session. And the managers were really great in just presenting all the information on this Google slide deck over Zoom. So we went over the slides, and we also had them for our reference later on. So if we ever had any questions, we could go back to there and check anything that we missed, or always, of course, ask over Slack or anything. But it was just good to have those resources whenever you'd kind of need them at the beginning.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So yeah, onboarding. I guess with onboarding, we touched on it a bit already, but were there any challenges or any glaring things that you found to be a bit difficult with your onboarding process? We'll start with Emily as well.
Yeah, I had just talked about it. I personally found it a little bit more difficult to get into the groove of things, just because I found that my internship had been super like tech heavy, and so if the materials you're working with aren't set up and don't work in the way that you need them to, the whole like process kind of crumbles. But fortunately, I was able to get that sorted out fairly quickly afterwards. I think it's definitely just a learning curve, and once you get over that, it's smooth sailing after that.
Nice. Actually, to touch on that, when you say learning curve, you mean not just for yourself, but everyone else in the company, right?
Yes. Everybody was super used to going into the lab, doing all the work there, being able to pop in down the question, and that's not something that's available now. And so you just have to adapt.
Awesome. Did anyone else have any other challenges with their onboarding?
No. I had good experiences.
Well, yeah, it's just emailing, having to learn that. And I think, but I mean, honestly, it wasn't as big of a deal because I spent most of my time just learning about the technology. So I actually had to read like a manual. So spent some time just looking over that. And yeah, I think the only issue was having to point out those errors in the manual to my employer. And sometimes, it's hard for me to get in contact with them. So I had to find the time that works for both of us. So.
Cool.
For me, it was no challenges, mostly because I'm used to using technology. Although I do have to say that I'm very privileged in that I live in a home where stable Wi-Fi is here, and I don't really have a lot of background noises or like a lot of people in the house. So I do have to say that when you talk about remote work, I feel it really does vary based on your living situation. But for me, it was okay.
Yeah, I would have to say the same as Priscilla. Went pretty smoothly for me as well.
That's good to hear. Awesome. Okay, so we'll move on from onboarding to now you're fully ramped up. You know exactly what you're doing. You're starting to do your work. For you, like what did a typical day look? I guess 2-in-1 question. What did a typical day look like? And then if you've done an in-person internship in the past, what kind of changes did you see were being made to accommodate a virtual setting? So yeah, like I guess normally if it's an in-person internship, obviously your typical day is you wake up, you commute to work, and then you sit down at your desk. What did that look like for all of you? And then if you've had an in-person internship in the past, what accommodations did you notice? Start off with Priscilla.
Yeah, I think definitely the biggest difference is not having commutes. Although for myself, instead of having the commute time, I just replaced it with something else. And for me, that was reading and walking, and so that kind of filled up that time, which is nice because it kind of like simulates the whole getting ready for work thing. I don't know, like when I think about my previous internship and this internship, not much is different because everything is online. I'm really on my computer all day, just like as I would be in person. Although I do miss the in-person meetings, but with the technology these days, with video conferencing, a lot of it could be comparable, and it's something that I've grown accustomed to.
Yugmaya, you want to go?
Yeah. So yeah, I think that not having to commute was a lot easier than last year because you could kind of start your day a bit more to your own, I guess, it's more under your control. And I saw that more so with just planning your week as well, because I think in person, like kind of more open to, maybe more spontaneous meetings or maybe other things kind of coming up. But when you're just at home kind of in your bubble, you're like able to plan out your day, kind of sit down and just like, it's just you and the computer. And I found that having my laptop and everything separate from where I woke up and like did other things was just really helpful, because in that way I felt like, okay, I'm getting up and going to work, even though my commute would be like 3 steps to the living room. But it felt like, it's time to kind of get into that zone and get ready for the day. But throughout the day, like I think because of a lot of the stuff that I did was maybe a little bit more independent or project based, I did really look forward to like the regular meetings with either the team or the bigger team, which was nice because then you could, because you get a bit of balance with that for sure.
Awesome. Jonathan, how about you?
Yeah, so I mean, each day, it's definitely a very flexible one. As long as I put in like 3 hours per week, which is like the criteria I had to meet, and then it's okay. So yeah, I mean, spent about 6-7 hours per day just troubleshooting some of the technologies that they sent me. So or I would say maybe specifically, I've worked on something called an FPGA, or field programmable gate array, which are these programmable logic boards which you can use to program whatever you want them to be used for. So yeah, I mean, I spent most of my time just checking out the hardware, seeing if I had any sort of issues with the boards. I also spent a lot of time with software too, with coding. there's definitely a lot of hair pulling from that, but yeah, I mean, yeah, that's usually a typical day.
Awesome.
For me, a lot of the day was still code dev, and because it was all virtual anyways, I could do it from home. The only thing that I found actually worked in my favor was because I was doing everything online from home and I didn't actually have to go into the lab and be there for a specific set of time. It meant that I could schedule my day however I wanted. And so I was actually able to stack up my internships in a way that worked out for me. That would just like be the most effective for me. So I would get up and, for example, work until a certain time when I would switch over and then go to my meeting, and then I'd have time again to like reflect and do other work, which I don't think would have been possible had I been in the lab 24/7, just because then I'm stuck there. This is what you're doing. This is what you're working on. And I think that actually kind of worked out in my favor. Other than that, I felt that obviously it was a shame I couldn't interact with my with other people in my lab quite as much. And I noticed this a lot when I had only been able to recognize 3 people out of the entire lab at one lab meeting that had happened like as a group. So yeah, there's definitely some pros and cons, but for me, it actually kind of worked out.
Awesome. This is actually going to be a question I had later on, but since we're already on this topic, what was it like interacting with the rest of your team? You know, you have interactions with your manager or your supervisor, whoever it is, maybe like 1 or 2 other direct coworkers, but what was it like if the company was a lot bigger than 20, 30, 40? How did you even interact with any of them? Start off with Priscilla.
For me, it wasn't too tricky, and that was because I joined a team of 4 people. So
oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, it was super small. I went from working in a company with 60 plus people to a group of 4 people, and so interacting with them wasn't too hard. We would have daily stand-ups for the whole company, which is probably not possible with larger companies. But you know, I got to, even though I wasn't working with them with their projects, like I hear their progress updates every day. It's almost as if I work with them, because the team is so tight and communication is so constant. And I got to know them through that way. So yeah, I never felt like I was separate or distant from people that I wasn't working with.
Okay, that's good to hear. So Priscilla's experience is more so, I guess, a typical kind of startup experience with a pretty small company and a pretty tight-knit group. Jonathan, how about you? How many people are in your company, and what was that experience like trying to get to know everyone else in the company?
Yeah, in my case, I would say the majority of the time I've actually been working between my supervisor and myself. But it wasn't until later on in my last 2 months of my work where I got to work with 2 other engineers. But I never got spoke to them. But we've actually just been texting each other through Skype, whether if I had any sort of questions or errors I ran into, I would just go to them and just share that through Skype. Yeah, so it was a very small, tight-knit group that I worked with, but I mean, it worked out in the end. So.
Awesome. How about you, Emily? How was with your different internships, talking to everyone else, or just socializing with everyone else in the company?
I think some places did it better than others, where you would have your individual meetings to make sure that like you're staying on track, be able to interact with everybody else on a larger meeting. However, it didn't happen. Like on one of mine, I only know my manager and then one other person. And I didn't realize this until one of the people at the lab was leaving, and I was invited to like a going away socially distant event. This was way back when like the pandemic hadn't started yet, but it was like everything had just gone online. And I like showed up and I realized I knew not a single person there. And it just like didn't really get better because you don't interact with these people. You're not in the lab with these people. And it is what it is. Like, it's a shame. I definitely feel like it would experience had I been able to interact with the other members, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Alrighty. Yogmaya, how about you? I know that you had kind of a different experience from everyone else, working in a 60+ person company. What was it like trying to socialize and interact with everyone else?
Yeah, I think one thing that really worked for, I'm sure the other interns as well, was So one of the managers, even he would hold like a Ask Me Anything with like managers from the entire company. So every week or so we would get to like, hear from like different managers and different people within the company. So we kind of got to meet them and like have, instead of like having a big team meeting where we don't really get to speak much, we got to kind of ask for questions and have that opportunity. And we also had like coffee buddies, so we could pretty much meet someone new every week. So you weren't just limited to your team, and as well as social. So I would say like there was quite a bit of opportunity to get to know people. Even with like the big team meetings, like I know hearing from the other interns, like if they saw something that interested them from like another team member, they would just reach out to them and set up a coffee chat, like even without the coffee buddy system. And like it felt like people were very open to socializing and getting to know you and, you know, helping you out as an intern and stuff. So yeah, it was, even though it was like a 60+ company, like there was a lot of opportunity to talk to people.
Yeah, that brings up a really great point where the culture of your company really matters when it comes to making sure everyone feels welcome and invited. Especially if you're an intern, you're only there for, let's say, 2 or 3 months. But especially if this is your first internship or your first time in this sort of a workplace, you wanna feel like you're at home. When you're in person, it's a bit easier because you can just walk up to someone else's desk and say, hey, hi, hello. But when you're literally kilometers apart from each other, or maybe even across the world from each other, it does get a little bit difficult. Actually, so for Emily and Jonathan, for the two of you, would you have liked to have had the opportunity to get to know your other coworkers better, or were you completely fine with just knowing that core group?
I would have really enjoyed getting to meet other people. I think that a social would have been a great idea. Having some sort of like more team building activities be implemented would have been great. But like that being said, I understand why we didn't have it. And for some of them, it's fine. Like for some of my internships, I didn't really care about the other people there. I liked them. They were all really interesting, but I was really there to like push forward a project I was really excited about. But for some other ones, they were definitely, it would have been really, really nice to interact with others.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Emily here. Like, it would be nice to actually be able to conversate with the rest of the team more. You know, getting to know more about their background and just their role with the company in general. But I think, you know, through my internship, at the same time, I also felt, you know, should be grateful for just being able to be an asset to the company in general. So,
yeah.
That's great to hear. All right, going back a little bit back to kind of your work day. Bit of a controversial question here, but what kind of work did you do? Did you feel was really successful because it was in a virtual setting versus what kind of work or projects did you do that you think would have been a lot better if I could do this in person? Start off with Yogmaya.
Oh, I think definitely project-based work was a lot better virtually because, like I said kind of earlier, you can plan your day according to how you want to do it. You have that independence, and you can kind of you can basically, you're not following tight deadlines or small deadlines. You're able to kind of create your own work schedule and during the day, which is really convenient, especially when you're working independently and alone. But I think things that are a little bit more task-based and things that may be a bit more monotonous or that might also need, or maybe the other way around, that are a little bit more where you're collaborating with someone, you have to make decisions, like having that in-person factor would have been really good because then you can actually, you don't have to set up a meeting every time, or you don't have to wait for like a Slack message. But that being said, it also kind of forces you to think about what you're actually asking and to think about what you actually want to say, where you're not just always, maybe distracting people or talking all the time. You're allowed to take a step back and think about, find resources within your own realm.
That's actually a very interesting point where you kind of, because it's a virtual setting and because you have to physically type out a question or an ask from someone else, you have that opportunity to reflect as you're typing. Is this not is this a dumb question? That's there's no dumb questions, I like to say. But you have the chance to go, could I figure this out by myself before I kind of take someone else, take someone else's attention or something like that. So that's really cool.
Yeah, like the amount of times I would start typing a question, be like, wait, I can find this somewhere else, or I know the answer, or I could like take a bit longer. Yeah, that's happened quite a few times. So definitely.
Awesome. How about you, Priscilla?
I think I'm not quite sure why you think that this is a controversial question. I guess are you saying like it's different for everyone?
Different for everyone. I don't know, just we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I would, because I think my answer might be different for other people because I'm very introverted. A lot of my best creative work comes from when I'm in a place where I'm comfortable and familiar with. And a lot of my work with LOI was a lot of creativity and thinking of new ideas and new solutions. And I felt like a lot of my success with my LOI internship was because I was in my comfortable space. A lot of my ideas just came out really naturally because I was in a space that I'm very comfortable with. So that's what I would say would be a good thing about internships. And that's only because that's my style of work. So I guess it will be different for everyone. I would say what is difficult with virtual work settings is those time periods where you have to complete something very quickly, or when there's deadlines coming up and you need to collaborate with other people. And it's just like way faster if you're in the same room and you can complete it together.
For sure. Yeah, that's a very interesting point you made about the fact that since you're more of an introverted person, you like having that little bit of space from everyone, especially just thinking about, just trying to remember being in an office. It's been so long. People kind of just come up to you every now and then and say, hey, like, and kind of break your mental space. So that's a really interesting point you've made there. Actually, I'm gonna extend that question over to Jonathan. Engineering students or just students in STEM kind of get this not a bad rap, but like this they expect them all to be more on the introverted side. What was your experience with like having a virtual setting, being in a virtual setting?
I mean, yeah, I would definitely totally agree with that myself. Like I would say I'm an introverted person myself. Like having my own space definitely definitely does help with my work. In terms of just seeing what is better, whether it's done virtually or on the job, I think for certain parts, like doing the software aspect of my work, so things like programming, remote work, I think that I would do well. I think it'd be best doing it virtually, especially if you have that sort of introvert personality. But I think when it comes to like hardware, I would say working on it at the workplace is probably the best way, because I find that the equipment that I work with, it's not necessarily the most cheapest thing you'll be working with. So therefore, having me to troubleshoot like hardware and stuff like that, I was quite limited to what I have. So in a way, my boss actually had to do some of that troubleshooting stuff on his end, because he has the equipment, but I don't. So yeah, I would say for that, working right at the workplace is best, because they have the needed tools to get the job done. So.
How about you, Emily?
I am so far on the other side. I am a very extroverted computer science student. And so I really, really like the office environment. I really, really like having other people just buzzing around. I feel like that background noise is super important for me. So a couple things that I had noticed is, one, when I would get to a point where I needed information from somebody else I was working with, I feel like I wouldn't be as productive because I couldn't get it as quickly. Whereas usually I'd be like, hey, you said you wanted this. Did you mean you wanted this or this? And so I couldn't do that. And therefore my progress until I was able to clarify a piece of information. And I felt that that came up like quite a few times where I personally would have loved to be in that setting. Another thing too is that I find that I just work better when there are people around me who I can like talk through my code, where I can be like, hey, like this is what I'm working on now. I have a bug in here. I'm just gonna go top to bottom. And when I had worked in more in-person settings, I found that I was a lot more productive. That being said, though, as the summer kind of went along, I feel like I definitely adapted to the process and I learned how to work on my own and work in my own quiet setting. But like, I need other human interaction a lot to be able to survive. Just for me to be able to enjoy myself, I really like having other people there.
Yeah, okay. That's a really good point. Just the whole you had to learn over the summer to keep yourself motivated and all of that. That actually leads me great segue into my next question, which is what are some things that you did or your manager did or people on your team did to help keep you accountable, motivated, or feel successful throughout your internship? We'll continue on with you, Emily.
Yes. In the group, we actually set up a daily meeting for the first little while, and I felt like that was super, super useful as I was getting familiar with the materials we were working with, just because that way I could bring concerns up every day, being like, hey, this is what I did, this is how far I've gotten, here are things that need clarifying. And as I kind of got into the groove of things, we dropped that down to like once or twice a week, and I found that that helped a lot initially, just to make sure I was getting comfortable and I wasn't getting stuck for days at a time. And then other than that, I think just having employers who are, or just anybody who you're working with, just be really open to having communication was something that I really valued. Making sure that I could email them if I was having issues and I wasn't about it or I wasn't feeling worried that I was bothering them, I feel like was super useful. Obviously, I'm not going to email them all the time because that would just be mayhem. Like, why would I even be employed at that point? But just for the first little bit to get into the groove of things until I get to a point where I can actually productively work on my code without being like, I have no idea what you want from me.
Awesome. Yeah. Yogmai, how about you? What helped keep you motivated or feel successful?
Like Emily, I prefer, people around or people to bounce ideas off of. But in terms of like staying motivated, I think that's also what really helped. Like every time we would either have like a one-on-one or a team meeting or like a big team meeting, it kind of helps you, kind of reminds you of why you're doing everything and also see like the bigger picture. Like by talking to other people, you also see how hard they're working and it's like a little extra boost. And also you kind of get inspired by what they tell you. And similar to we in our Slack channel, we would send daily, not updates, but just kind of what we're doing for the day. And that really helps you, like as an individual, plan out your day and also see what everyone else is up to, seeing if you can help them with anything or kind of just, getting a better picture of what's going on. So yeah, I think just even though it was virtual, like having that human interaction and having the bigger company meetings where we talk about things in like the bigger picture, it really helps keep you grounded and focused on why you're doing something, which can really help when, you're alone sitting in front of your computer and kind of feeling low after a long week. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear. Before I move on to Priscilla and Jonathan here, actually, one thing that Yogmaya mentioned kind of reminded me of some of the benefits of moving into a virtual setting, not just for internships, but we have this thing every Monday called an all hands where 60 plus people get onto the call and talk. When it used to be in person, it was like just one big room and everyone sat there and kind of listened. But now that we had to move the whole call virtually and you can actually see all 60 people show up in the call, and we actually see a lot more engagement because with Zoom, there's a little chat on the sidebar and then you can send people reactions and emojis and all that. So it's interesting to see that when things are a bit more virtual, there are some instances where it becomes a bit more engaging and a bit more more opportunities to kind of just share with others. How about we go with Priscilla next?
Yeah, on that note, meetings. For me, I found meetings to be really good motivators because it sits in your calendar and you know that, okay, this day is coming, and it helps you. I agree with you, Maya, it does ground you when you know you're about to speak with somebody or another human being and that you're about to go over work and how to progress from there. And those are things I look forward to. It's kind of weird because like, meetings are something that people like dread and stuff, especially in person. But because you're in a virtual setting, it kind of like puts that time box on it. And something that I like really look forward to, because again, that's something that it's time that you can socialize with somebody. And also, yeah, it also helps you ground your schedule and how you want to plan your work. And so if I know I have a meeting coming up in 2 days, it helps me plan that, okay, I need to get all these things done within the next 2 days. So yeah, meetings I've grown to like.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess a running theme already is over communication is key, whether that's through meetings or little Slack messages or emails. How about you, Jonathan? What helped keep you accountable or motivated or feel successful?
I would just say just the work that I do. I think just enjoying my work is one of the things that really helps motivate me. But I think for everyone here that mentioned about communication, I think that's something that I wish I had more of, and I think that would definitely help with motivation throughout my internship. Because like even to this day, like I've never had any sort of face-to-face conversation with my boss. Like I don't even know what he looks like or whatnot. Like other than his profile picture, we had never done any sort of video call or whatnot. So, but I think just having that sort of face-to-face communication, I think that's definitely a really big thing to really keep each other in check and to really just move forward with the sort of tasks that needs to be done. Yeah.
Awesome, that's good to hear. And then I guess we're getting some pretty good questions here, so I might actually jump into one of the questions because it also is aligned with one of the questions I was going to ask you guys anyways. Can you guys shed some light on, this is a question from Peter, I see. Can you shed some light on anything that you wish more employers had done or things that didn't work as well during your internship experience? Who wants to start?
I think definitely it's super, super important to make sure that, one, we make it very clear what the communication like tracks are for you and your employer, but also for you and the other individuals, and kind of what is the expected level of communication. I know that for us, we hadn't really discussed initially like how much we were expected to like update, how much we were expected to communicate, and so that would have been super useful. The other thing that I really would have wished was just and we mentioned this earlier, was just an opportunity to interact with others. I think that having had set up like overarching like group meetups of like game nights, like some social nights, coffee chats, whatever, would have been super, super beneficial. I think that it would have made the experience a lot more positive and just made sure that everybody in the group was staying motivated and connected to other people. I think that those were mostly what I felt would have been really, really nice to have in my internship.
Awesome. Anyone else have any other things to share?
I totally agree with Emily about communication. Like, as someone who's new to the company, it's, communication is almost like culture. Like, is this too much over communication? Is this too much communication? But it really does depend on the culture. And as an intern, you're coming new, you don't know what it's like. And so a lot of those cultural things have to be explicitly said. So yeah, I totally agree. Like, really set out like how much you're expecting to communicate your progress and your work.
Awesome. So yeah, for sure, setting expectations at the very beginning when it comes to communication is key. How about anything that involves goal setting or kind of your own personal growth in the role? Anyone have anything to touch on that? Maya?
So there wasn't anything specific that like the team could have done in terms of personal goals, but I think for me, like adjusting to the virtual environment, like the biggest challenge was probably like just keeping tabs on myself. Like I said, you're kind of in your own bubble, and then the weeks just kind of go on, and then when the weekly check-in would come in, I would kind of forget what happened in the last week. So I would just be like, oh wait, yeah, like I would slowly come back to me. But I think just having that time period or something to help you reflect on what's happened, just for yourself, or just kind of like recenter approach to your internship, just so you're, just keeping tabs on yourself and making sure that you're taking in everything, that it's not just limited to the screen in front of yourself. I think that's something that's been a struggle, not just with virtual internships, but school as well, like making sure it's actually really sinking in. So.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. And this kind of touches on Priscilla's point on culture as well. This is a tough time for almost everyone. We're all kind of going through a bunch of different things at once, and having that empathy when it comes to, for example, as a manager of a few virtual interns, having the empathy and kind of going, what's going on with the rest of your life that might be blocking your own current work, because right now there's not much of a separation between your work life and your personal life, because everything's all right here in front of you on your laptop computer. So a little bit of that empathy and a little bit of making sure you check in now and then, not just what kind of work have you been doing, but also is there anything else in your own personal life that might be stopping you from achieving your best work right now. How about you, Jonathan? Anything you would like to done differently, or your manager could have done differently, and any possible solutions for that?
Yeah, I would say, communication is definitely one major thing. I think also, keeping in check as well. So I did feel like, being my own bubble, almost felt like the work that I was doing is for myself in a way, as opposed to for the company. Because I felt like I was just thrown into the pool and was supposed to having to learn on my own, that sort of thing. So I think, definitely being able to just keep in touch more with the interns, and making short-term goals as you go along, right? Because I did feel like I did spend most of my time making my own goals, and most of my goals happen to be long-term. But I think, having short-term goals, getting certain things done throughout the week would definitely help with them. Knowing what needs to be done and having to make progress. Yeah.
That's awesome. Go for it.
Oh, I was just going to touch on the goals takeaways from the experience, because I think that's a great question. Personally, every time I apply for a position, my goal is to be just a little bit uncomfortable in the role. I want it to be something that I have the knowledge necessary to be able to complete, but that I don't know how to do yet. And so whenever I go into a position, my goal is to learn and develop and grow as much as I possibly can. And I feel like that happens best in an uncomfortable situation. I really believe in the step out of your comfort zone. So for me, when I first joined the bioinformatics group, I had experience with R, and I had a lot of coding experience. However, this was applying it in a different way than what I'd done before. This was a lot of data analysis, a lot of biological data analysis. So it was like DNA, RNA sequence worked with before. And so for me, my main goal was to be able to get something out of it that I didn't have coming in. And yes, it does look great on your resume, but for me, the bigger part of it is that I now have a skill that I didn't have before. And so that was my main goal and takeaway when I went into it.
Yeah. Why don't we extend this question to everyone else as well? Like, what were your main goals or takeaways at the very even before you joined the internship, and how did that translate afterwards? Jonathan, you want to go next?
I would say just a lot has to do with my soft skills. So just finding ways to just communicate better, finding ways to really be more detailed and concise with my reports, because I did have to spend a lot of time just sharing some things I've had gone through. So I had to write reports to my supervisor so that he can actually understand what has been going on my end. So I think with virtual internship, you don't necessarily have your boss looking over you 24/7, right? So a lot of the things that you do in your home is what allows you to really spend time making your own mistakes, right? So I'd say that's definitely a really big takeaway is for me to really is really learning how to communicate better and to be concise about it.
I love that. For a lot of students, your internship experience is your opportunity to not just apply the hard skills you learned in school, whether that's R, some coding language, marketing theory, all that kind of stuff, into real life setting, but it's also getting the chance to flex your soft skills, your communication, professionalism, storytelling through data, all these different kinds of things. You don't really have the chance to do that at school. So having the chance to kind of apply or develop those in the workplace is super, super key. How about you, Priscilla? Same question. What were your goals and takeaways in the beginning or even before you joined the internship, and how did that translate afterwards?
Mm-hmm. Now that I reflect about what happened right before I accepted my internship, I actually had 2 internship offers on the table. One of them was a startup and the other was LOI, a nonprofit. They're quite different. And it was a really tricky decision because I've always wanted to work in a startup, and the role was a sales job. So that would be amazing for like practicing my skills in sales. But I chose LOI, the nonprofit, because I realized, internships are times where you just try whatever, because they are very short term. And so I thought, I would really like to take the time to see what working in a nonprofit is like. And so that was my biggest takeaway. I got to see what it's like to work on the operational side of a nonprofit, because I have worked on the governance side before. And working in a nonprofit is really interesting when I compare it with like a startup or like a for-profit business, in that your focus is not on revenue and profit. Your focus is now on executing value and providing the value that you set out to do, because the funds have already been secured. And so I'm really glad I made this decision to try out the nonprofit world. It's been really rewarding. I think it's really interesting to see the difference there.
That's really great to hear. Yeah, internships are your opportunity to try new things. You're going to be in this role for 2 to 3 months and make mistakes, make as many mistakes as you possibly can, and learn. How about you, Yugmaya? Same question.
Yeah, I think knowing that this internship was going to be virtual, something that I did struggle with in the past was, and still kind of struggle with, is self-organization and making, sometimes like when you have a lot going on and just a lot of ideas, like you kind of get scrambled, and then having this be virtual and be completely independent kind of forces you to organize and take a step back and really flex those skills. So that's something I really kind of took away from this internship. Like when you're fully responsible for everything that you're doing, you're able to feel empowered to use those skills, and you feel a bit more comfortable in using those skills, and even making mistakes, because it's just you at the end of the day for those things. And I think, like similar to Emily, it was also just learning as much as I can, but also building on top of what I already knew and was already doing. So this is my second internship at Riipen. So I actually got to learn a lot last year, and then this year, because I was returning, I think I got to experience a bit more by building on top of what I already known, and keep it going from there. So that was really cool.
Yeah, really great. And one final question here from Andre. Did you get feedback from your employers on the value brought to their business? So I guess, did you get feedback on kind of the impact you made on your company? Who wants to start? Who wants to start with the bragging?
Well, I still work at my company.
Okay.
I ended up actually taking up a position throughout the school year as well. Obviously, it's fewer hours just because I am taking class as well, but they told me it worked well. I wrote code, they used the code, so I'm assuming it went well considering I'm still there. Whenever I would get feedback, though, it would usually be on a smaller scale. It would be like, here's my code. How does it look? And then I would get direct feedback, and he left. Oh, no. Well, I get feedback, and I'd be able to look back, directly apply it to the code that I had. Yeah.
How about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, well, my employer definitely really liked me. He really liked just my work ethic, just being able to really share my sort of issues I ran into, just being able to ask questions when I need to. Yeah, I think he, in general, I don't think he really liked me because of the work that I did, but I think it was just for me being like a really good worker and just in general, just being able to really carry that on towards my future internships or other workplaces that will work in the future.
It's great to hear. How about you, Maya? Bit of a weird question since I'm sitting right here.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if you disagree. But I think a few things that I heard kind of towards the end of internship in terms of feedback was from just being able to do things that the rest of the team wouldn't normally have time to do, or like maybe test out some things that they wouldn't have normally the time to do. And that was really good to hear, because that means that you're not just taking on somebody else's role, you're doing something that wouldn't be normally done if you weren't there. So maybe working on like a new initiative or testing out a new way of inbound marketing or something, or testing ads, things like that. So being able to make the add on to the team in terms of its capacity was probably the biggest impact.
Yeah, trusting your virtual intern to kind of do their best work is a really key part of the process. If you they won't trust themselves, so it's super important part of that whole thing. How about you, Priscilla?
Yeah, feedback like came out was regular and consistent throughout the whole internship. But I guess the value that I brought to the company, I guess that didn't really sink in until my last day, when I had a check-in, like a final check-in with my manager. It lasted for 2 hours. There was just a lot to unpack, you know, like you go through the daily motions of doing your work, but you don't really have time to sit down and reflect, like, what did I actually provide? Like, the kind of value that I actually give to the world. And so when I had that 2 hour check-in, like, and then it finally sank in, like, oh, well, I actually did a lot, and I learned a lot, and I feel like me and the organization have benefited from the internship.